Okay, look, I know I teased an upcoming lore analysis in the last video I posted, and I am still working on that, slowly. I just keep getting distracted. See, after the Game Awards, all of my news feeds on every platform were just filled with this absurd anti-woke drivel complaining about Siri and, this character. Sorry, I don't know their name. The one from the intergalactic heretic thing. You know the one. Anyway, I saw all of these lies and insane claims being spread around, as per usual, by the regressive Neanderthals living in all of the most embarrassing corners of the internet, and I just had to say something about it. I decided to make a video about it to post on this channel where I talk about Elden Ring because of comments like this. And because, as it turns out, a lot of the people doing shit like this are the same people you'll see doing stuff like this. Ah yes, FromSoft, the company with traditional gender roles that makes sure all of its men look like men and women look like women. I want to make sure this is perfectly clear before we move on. That one comment I highlighted was saying that the person who posted it has started exclusively playing FromSoftware games to get away from things like storylines exploring themes of patriarchy in medieval settings, and the comment was posted under an article about a game that was showcased with a trailer centered around a young girl being sacrificed by her village in order to appease the gods and presumably maintain the safety of the rest of the village. That's literally just the story of Anastasia from Dark Souls. Idiot. I mean, I know better than to expect media literacy from these people, but this recent tantrum they've been throwing highlighted to me how important it is for them to refuse to acknowledge any so-called woke elements in games from developers like FromSoft. See, their primary slogan is, "Go woke, go broke." So if they acknowledge the huge success of games like Baldur's Gate 3 or the previous game of the year, Elden Ring, or Fallout, which recently got an extremely successful adaptation featuring just about everything these hillbillies hate.
Guess you had one of your meetings, huh? One of your communist meetings? Come on, man.
And speaking of Fallout, the better game made by the same people, Outer Worlds, just got a sequel announced at the same event that featured the infamous Witcher and Intergalactic trailers. There was also an announcement of an Elden Ring spin-off or something, or maybe it was Dark Souls skins in Fortnite, I'm not sure. Whatever, anyways, back to Outer Worlds. I'd be remiss not to point out that the first game featured even more anti-American commie propaganda than Fallout does.
Clyde. He was a blustery old cuss. Carried on about violent revolution and seizing the means of production. Clyde was my first friend, but he was also my mentor. Taught me how to think, how to question, how to disobey.
And apparently one of the side quests in the game is setting up a date between Junlei and some asexual techie named Parvati. I don't know, not sure how I missed this quest, but cool. Personally, I think my favorite symptom of the woke mind virus from the Outer Worlds was this excerpt from a bit of queer anarchist erotica written by one of the game's NPCs. Or we could even talk about the universally loved franchise I referenced a bit ago, which stars a brown femme protagonist, constantly makes fun of capitalism, and even takes a quick jab at patriarchy at the start of the second game.
Do you know who ended up taking her down in the end? You're not going to believe this. A human. I know, I wouldn't have believed either. Apparently this human escaped and nobody's seen him since.
Anyway, back to the sentence I started but didn't finish because I got distracted listing examples. What I was saying with all of these examples is that if the reactionaries were to acknowledge the huge success of all of these quote-unquote woke games, they'd undercut their whole message that going woke makes companies go broke, despite evidence consistently suggesting otherwise. You know what the number one most critically acclaimed game of all time is? Yeah, it's Elden Ring, obviously. It used to be The Last of Us Part 2, which is sometimes viewed as the mascot of the woke agenda in the game industry, but Elden Ring surpassed it a couple years ago by a pretty wide margin. Third game on the list? The Witcher 3. Interesting. Personally, I think the next game from those developers, Cyberpunk 2077, is one of the most socially conscious, woke games I've ever played. I wonder how it's doing now. And as a quick side note, I want to point out that it's not just games where woke media is dominating. I mentioned the Fallout TV show already, but my personal favorite show of the last year was The Penguin, which gained universal acclaim and won several awards after getting dozens of nominations at multiple awards ceremonies. And it's basically an 8-episode condemnation of capitalism with some commentary attacking things like patriarchy and ableism mixed in.
And I refuse to let these old fucking men push me aside again like I'm nothing, so I'm gonna take from them now. And I'm gonna force them to their knees. This should be fun.
So, a little house cleaning before we go any further. As uncomfortable as it is for me, I have reluctantly stooped to using the term woke to talk about the things these dweebs are complaining about, because there really isn't any better way to describe those specific elements of the media in question. The problem here is that what's bothering these people is just realism. They're simply complaining that modern games, movies, shows, whatever, have realistic depictions of reality with characters who aren't white, characters without gender identities, polyamorous characters, characters in wheelchairs, etc. Just, the sort of realistic things you see in real life on a daily basis, as long as you don't live in an isolated colony of 20 people out in the Ozarks somewhere. So a better word for the sort of content triggering the misogynistic chud squad is realistic, or normal, sensible. Any of these words would work. But since they don't specifically highlight the so-called DEI aspect of realism, I'll be reluctantly deigning to use the nauseating terminology popularized by the unofficial Andrew Tate fan club. Now let's get back into it. If someone wants to pretend that woke things aren't popular, they need to do two things simultaneously. First, they need to highlight the failure of anything that's widely seen as woke that underperformed, and if possible, exaggerate or outright lie about any woke media's reviews and level of commercial success. This is what we're seeing right now with Intergalactic. Secondly, they need to pretend that anything that's too popular to paint as a failure is completely unwoke. This is what we're seeing them do now with FromSoft titles, Baldur's Gate 3, and so on, despite initially complaining about those games. If they can't do either, they'll probably just ignore it and hope that no one brings it up, like with Fallout, Outer Worlds, and so on. So yeah, let's talk about this. The myth of Intergalactic being disliked into oblivion is the main thing I wanted to address before I even realized this was a topic I'd feel compelled to discuss on this channel. This is the primary claim I keep seeing repeated by YouTubers, Twitter Sigmas, Facebook meme pages, half-assed news outlets, or maybe tabloids would be a better word for them, whatever. You get it. These fake screenshots are all over the place, each one slightly different, all obviously edited, but people are taking them at face value and making videos, articles, and posts about them as if they were real. But not only are they fake, the point they're trying to make is also false. Most of the reactions to the video in question were positive. How do I know that? I checked. It's very easy to do if you use a YouTube clone that still displays dislikes like I do on my TV in everyday life, so I just had to pull up that video and look at the numbers on the screen. Then I took a photo with my phone to show you. But then I realized it looks like I cropped the photo so you can't see what channel posted it, so it could be a different video than the specific one people are talking about. So the next day I went back when that thought crossed my mind and I took this video to make sure there's no room for uncertainty. They're just blatantly lying, not exaggerating or omitting context. It's just an entirely fabricated claim. Whoever started spreading the disinformation about Intergalactic in the first place was probably just assuming that people wouldn't have access to the information they were lying about. And lucky for them, the incels that always complain about this stuff never bothered to fact check anything. So this very lazy and easily debunked lie went viral, with all the reactionaries just immediately believing it without bothering to question it at all. But if you're actually inclined to, do your own research, it's very easy to find out for yourself that this whole thing is just blatant lies. We even have this article, which I'm posting here in its entirety, along with a reminder that U.S. Title 17, Section 107 includes criticism as an example of types of fair use of copyrighted materials, which claims that the Intergalactic trailer has more dislikes than the one for Concord, which got 84,000 dislikes by the time the article went up. Intergalactic had 64,000 dislikes at that time, so the claim is just a flat-out lie, first of all. But more importantly, what they're really trying to do is imply with tricky wording that Intergalactic has a worse ratio of likes to dislikes than Concord did, and that's nowhere close to the truth. Concord's ratio across multiple trailers was pretty consistently about 1 to 10 likes to dislikes, meaning only about 9% of people liked those videos. Intergalactic, on the other hand, has a positive ratio with about 62% of people liking it. This article is saying that Intergalactic's 62% approval rating is worse than Concord's 9%. So even if the explicit claim was true, which again it's not, the implicit claim that the ratio of likes to dislikes is worse than 1 to 10 is also untrue. The real ratio is about 5 to 3 likes to dislikes. So really this is 2 lies in 1. But their dishonesty doesn't end there. The lies even extend to the footage that we can all clearly see in these trailers. They're putting so much effort into gaslighting us all about Ciri's body fat percentage, for instance. There's a lot to say about this, but I want to make sure I make this point clearly up front when addressing this topic. The most important response to these dumbass memes and posts is to point out that if you have a problem with a character not fitting into your own personal parameters for what you subjectively consider attractive, that's a flaw of yours, not the game's. So developers can't do anything to fix the issue when the problem is you. It's your responsibility to get over that particularly cringe form of stupidity so that you can choose to either play the game and enjoy it for what it is, not expecting it to be fanservice porn catering specifically to you, or simply choose not to play it because it's not what you're looking for. Either choice being perfectly reasonable, and neither requiring a tantrum on Twitter about how you don't think a fictional person is hot when no one was ever trying to turn you on with the design of that character in the first place. So that's the first point I want to make, that if you care whether a character is hot, you have serious issues. If you care enough to rant about it in a YouTube video or Facebook group at least. There's a difference between not wanting to romance Karlach, for instance, because you're just not into muscle mommies, versus making YouTube rants accompanied by altered screenshots you're pretending are real because you want a game to fail because it has a somewhat masculine protagonist. There's obviously a spectrum of how much people care about things, from total indifference on one side to rabid insanity on the other. But if you're editing Ciri screenshots to convince people that she looks fat now because you can't stand the idea of a character you used to find hot getting a bit older, then you've gone off the rails into the crazy territory of that indifference to insanity spectrum. And that doesn't even address the fact, and yes, I do mean fact, that she doesn't even look fat. It's just another thing that was completely fabricated. And no, this is not a subjective opinion issue. It's very clear that they're going out of their way to misrepresent how Ciri looks in the trailer by singling out one specific frame rather than talking about any of the other shots in a 6-minute trailer. When we compare Ciri from The Witcher 3 to other frames of her in this Witcher 4 trailer, things start to look quite a bit different than the picture the incels are trying to paint for us. You've probably seen this meme floating around making fun of these nerds. Well, they responded to that too, and it's just as cringe as everything else they say. This Twitter user claimed Ciri was drawn with narrower cheeks than she has in the trailer, which, again, just is not true. You people know that if a human opens their mouth, their cheeks appear more concave as their jawline gets more elongated because the mandible is rotating to move the chin away from the rest of the skull, stretching all the muscle, skin, and other flesh that makes up the cheeks, right? Like, you understand basic anatomy and how opening your mouth automatically makes your cheeks look thinner? You can't be this stupid. Anyway, I have to back up and do a little side note about this tweet real quick. I know I showed it on screen already, but this tweet is just so fucking funny. Oh, what you're worried about more than anything else is a flamboyant Geralt? Well, I got some news for you, Mark. See, I've sucked a lot of dicks in my life, but this right here is the gayest shit I've ever seen. I've gone to fetish events in San Francisco and Lower Manhattan, but nothing can compete with Geralt just in his everyday normal behavior in terms of flamboyancy. Geralt's unrealistically silly ballet-inspired style of fighting is often made fun of and memed on by readers of the source material too, for the record. He's not a fighter so much as a ballerina with a sword. Geralt has always been a notoriously flamboyant fancy boy. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Now, this next topic requires a huge disclaimer slapped in front of it regarding the subjectivity of attractiveness. People like different things, and that's great. I wouldn't want anyone to think that something I'm saying is implying that people should or should not be attracted to a particular thing. But if somebody tells me they find these two characters unattractive, I simply don't believe them. You can say they're not your type, they're not what you're personally drawn to, that's fine. I'm not particularly enamored with Kratos or Samus, for instance, but I'm not going to turn around and say those characters are ugly because they aren't my type. That would be stupid. But even if they were, it's not like that would make their games bad. Mario, for instance, is a character who I would say is ugly, but it's not like Mario games suck because the main character is ugly. They suck because you're rescuing the princess and defending the monarchy, but that's another topic. I mean, I certainly don't want to reinforce mainstream beauty standards, sorry Mario, but if we're looking at the actual argument that keeps getting put forward, that Western game developers are ignoring or defying conventional beauty standards, that's obviously nonsense. What are conventional beauty standards? Well, there's a handful of traits that have been constantly glamorized by mainstream media for probably as long as our current forms of media have existed. Facial symmetry, high cheekbones, sharp features, pouty lips, you get the idea. And both of these characters exemplify all of the traits I associate with conventional beauty standards, except that one of them has a shaved head. But some of these people are very insistent that the shaved head has nothing to do with what they're upset about. And I love the absurdity of these comments, right? Like this one that says that it's the message behind the haircut that's pissing everyone off. I'm sorry, I must have missed the manifesto Naughty Dog published before this trailer came out explaining the symbolism of the shaved head, but, you know, that's on me. But let's not overlook this comment that says that it's the character's demeanor that's the problem, and their attitude is reminiscent of Forspoken. Honestly, this might be the craziest thing I've seen anybody say about it. But even though you'll see some people claiming that it's a message or a character's attitude that they're complaining about, we have all of these other people explicitly making fun of these characters for their appearances, and even some going as far as to try to fix them. And this fix totally throws me off because it's going in the opposite direction from conventional beauty standards. What, high cheekbones and sharp jawlines are unattractive now? The alternate version's lower set cheekbones, thicker, more convex cheeks, and generally softer and more rounded features, these alterations are all contrary to traditional beauty standards. Again, if you're more into those sorts of features, that's fine, but I'd consider that an opposition to mainstream beauty standards, not conformity to them. So yeah, the complaint about supposed ugliness is just a smokescreen for what's really upsetting these people. But if it's not actually about characters being unattractive, what's the issue? It seems like what's upsetting them is really just the fact that these are strong, independent body type B protagonists that aren't the love interests, apprentices, or otherwise secondary characters in the shadow of a traditional, cisgendered, heterosexual body type A hero. I watched this video a while back on the fake controversy these same people imagined over Stellar Blade when they claimed that games journalists were against the game despite everyone praising it. And to be clear, when I say these same people, I mean in many cases the exact same individuals. Asmongold, Mark Kern, you know the ones. And it was a great video, outlined everything very well, I definitely recommend it, but the big takeaway from it is Shaun's suggestion that the real problem these dorks have with diversity is that it signifies that they are not the target audience, and they feel like they're entitled to having everything marketed squarely and exclusively to them. I felt like this conclusion was solid enough while I was watching the video. It seemed like it was fairly sensible, but as a general rule of thumb, I always try to remain skeptical and consider other possibilities, at least until they've been ruled out. But then with this new episode of the Culture War kicking off, I saw this tweet, and then I saw it reposted a lot on different platforms, ignoring the fact that there's also posts like this, making it pretty fucking clear who at least some of the target audience is. So I started looking into it, and I realized that if you actually pay attention to the tantrums these people are throwing, they make it pretty damn clear that, yeah, that's exactly what this is. So we have our confirmation. Shaun was right. They're just upset that they aren't the target audience. They can't handle the idea that a piece of media might be marketed to a different demographic than themselves, because they've grown accustomed to being pampered and having everything revolve around them. The extra annoying thing about this particular tantrum is that we can be pretty sure that Intergalactic won't succeed, and not because of supposed wokeness. Because despite the character already having a pretty clear group of fans, the game itself really doesn't have much of a target audience. Obviously, there's the faction of insecure sexists that can't cope with strong femme protagonists, but then on the other side you also have all of the sensible people who won't buy the game because it's from Naughty Dog, the same company that shat out The Last of Us, a Zionist metaphor for the company's overtly racist, genocidal politics. And now that the average person seems to be finally waking up to how scummy Zionism is, it seems pretty unlikely that Naughty Dog will continue to enjoy the same sort of support and success that they're used to. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad that everyone's shitting all over Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann for one reason or another. They definitely deserve way worse. But it sucks that the notoriously dishonest incels who are already whining about the DEI agenda of Intergalactic will get the opportunity to paint the game's failure as a win for their bigoted agenda, because anyone who actually opposes bigotry will refuse to support the game because the company making it has a different bigoted agenda. Should we take bets now on how well the internet chuds like Asmongold and Mark Kern will understand and acknowledge the nuance of that after the game launches? I don't know, leave your predictions below, I guess, whatever. I mean, we've already seen how that plays out with other games that failed recently for a wide variety of reasons, from Concord's absurd live service design and lackluster gameplay, to Veilguard's cringe dialogue, boring story, and disappointing combat. To be clear, I haven't played either of those, I'm just repeating what the actual reviews that I've seen say. But the anti-woke mob wants us to believe that they failed simply because they have non-binary characters or something. You know they'll do the same thing with Intergalactic. Okay, so I didn't really know where to put this in the video, and I don't have a good segue for it, but there is one more meme I wanted to talk about, because it's bad. Really bad. This particular meme isn't just dripping with the same cringy sexism as the rest of them. It's also weirdly racist. We can't let them pretend that all Japanese developers are this boring. I mean, it's cool if you like these characters, probably. Maybe. I don't actually know too much about most of them, to be honest. But what I do know is that grouping all Japanese developers together and implying that they all do the same sort of thing, or that they're all fundamentally different from other developers. What the hell is Western even supposed to mean, by the way? Everyone who's not Japanese? Whatever. As I was saying, expecting all people of any particular nationality to make the same sort of thing is not only racist, it's just demonstrably false. But I did find it interesting that they neglected to include any FromSoft character. And this omission of FromSoft from their analyses brings us full circle. I didn't mention this as being one of my motivations for making this video initially because it actually didn't happen until after I'd started recording audio. But it couldn't have been timed more perfectly. CI Games was apparently so scared of the recent reactionary meltdown that they made a big public show of removing the body type A and B labels from Lords of the Fallen, and issued a dishonest statement claiming that they'd keep politics out of their games, which of course is bullshit, but they're saying whatever they think they need to say in order to appease the angry incels who won't stop ranting about everything. These rants have been going on for a while, but they recently reached a fever pitch. I had the unpleasant experience of watching this video from a couple of years ago, complaining specifically about FromSoft using the A and B labels instead of M and F. And it was just...
so stupid.
yeah, that. But what these psychos somehow don't understand, well, one of the many things they don't understand, is that body type is simply the correct term. Male and female labels would simply be less accurate and more convoluted without saying any specific thing. Physical gender, also known as sex, is a social construct that was constructed by applying social ideas of masculinity and femininity to physical traits. In other words, the application of gender to body types A, B, and everything else is how we get the idea of physical sex. Male, female, intersex, whatever. But biologists have never agreed on which physical traits definitively determine sex. There are several conflicting methods of establishing sex, and none of them without their flaws. In fact, the more we learn about the complexities of primary and secondary sex characteristics, the more blurry the distinctions get. There's plenty of examples of real-life people who subverted various systems of sex classification simply by existing, because the frameworks scientists built don't conform to their biologies. So when talking about a character with a particular body type, the sensible and simple way to describe that body type is by referring to it directly as a body type. The male or female label adds several unnecessary layers of vague complications and ultimately sexist nonsense. Most people, of course, won't agree with or accept any of this, but that's simply a knee-jerk reaction born from a reactionary impulse to defend what's familiar rather than embracing whatever makes the most sense. Okay, this video keeps getting longer. As I'm recording this bit, the Nazis who have taken over the US government have just begun attempting to scrub the internet of any resources that acknowledge that gender, including biological sex, is a spectrum, and that it's, at the very least, more complicated than the binary these reactionaries are obsessed with. CDC web pages are already going down, and I'll be surprised if other organizations aren't targeted after them. So since, by the time I actually get this video uploaded, it may be the only place on the internet to still get accurate information about sex, I'm going to have to double down and be extra clear about it. A lot of people will tell you, probably pretty loudly over the next few years, that sex and gender are different things. That's the crux of what a lot of these conservatives are complaining about in regards to the body type issue. They'll say it's not even about identity, it's just a simple matter of biology. None of that is true. In reality, sex is a subset of gender, which is an umbrella term that includes mental and personality traits on one side, as well as physical traits, commonly known as sex. The differentiation between sex and gender is kind of like saying an orange and a fruit are two different things, which, I mean, yeah, that's kind of true. But an orange is a type of fruit, just like sex is a type of gender. It's important to stress that sex and gender are not synonymous to reinforce the obvious fact that biology doesn't dictate what someone wears, how they present themselves, what their personality is like, and so on. But it's also important to remember that sex is a subset of gender because that emphasizes the fact that biological sex is a social construct. Babies are not born with an M or F stamped on their foreheads. They're born with several interconnected, complex systems of physiological characteristics which society analyzes through the lens of gender and clumsily attempts to summarize all of those characteristics with an overly simplistic sex assignment. Body type is one of the many things that gets filtered through that gender framework to label someone as one sex or another, and it's the only part of that analysis that we're looking at on the character creation screen.
Now, another interesting thing that this study did was determine the sex of the individuals at the lake. And this is a really beautiful study that I think all of you should keep and show next time you hear a TERF on the internet say, oh, when they find your skeleton, they're gonna know that you were a man. Because with our cutting edge modern technology of 2023, of the 27 skeletons found at Rupkund Lake, there were only to decisively determine the sexes of 2 of them. There was 1 confirmed male and 1 confirmed female. And then with that, there were 4 probable males and 5 probable females, and 16 individuals remained completely unidentified. So take that bone powder in your J.K. Rowling pipe and shove it up your...
So, body type is the correct descriptor. But, do games sell poorly if they use that terminology? Obviously not. CI Games is just run by some very dumb people catering to the most toxic corners of the gaming world. But most of what I would say in response to their absurd comments was already printed in this article. It's a great article, I'll link it below. It talks about the queer themes in Souls games and how they've always focused on stories about the oppression of class society and religion. There's a couple points I would have added, like how Ronnie introduces an explicit anti-authoritarian element to Elden Ring by questioning how long it will be until the tarnished tire of obeisance. I would have highlighted all of the crucified people, pointed out the treatment of the trolls and the misbegotten under the Golden Order, the genocide of those who live in death, all painting the picture that the Old Order was monstrous and had to be eliminated. Then there's the fact that you have to commit the first cardinal sin in order to beat the game, meaning that you can't beat Elden Ring while defending the status quo or staying true to the Old Order. And of course, when you reach the end of the game, you kill God. There's a lot of games where you kill some sort of godlike being at the end, someone that considers themselves a god or some dark lord of whatever. But this is one of the few games where you actually kill the god of the world you inhabit. Probably a weird comparison, but the way Enya tells the maidenless Tarnished to become Marika's consort, and then instead you decapitate her, kind of reminded me of Doom Eternal, the way Samar leads the Doomslayer to God's life sphere, and then he just immediately fucking shatters it. And just like in Elden Ring, you can do that in Doom while wearing fantastic fashion. You know what, come to think of it, Doom Eternal is the most woke game of all time. But Elden Ring's a close second. And thanks to Elden Ring and the experience of making this video, I now have new terminology to add to my everyday vocabulary. I don't use terms like male and female pretty much ever for obvious reasons. They're ill-defined and unnecessarily complicated, arguably hollow signifiers. So for the past few years, I've been using the words mask and femme most of the time to describe people's builds and aesthetics. But I think body type A and B is the perfect terminology to describe a body type. Or maybe the Baldur's Gate 3 terminology of body type 1, 2, 3, and 4. Anyway, I'm glad games have now become woke enough to help me in refusing to participate in gender essentialism. And can somebody let me know in the comments, when exactly do the companies that go woke go broke? I think I missed that part. Anyway, I'm obviously not going to play that intergalactic thing because it's just not very woke to give money to people who endorse apartheid and racial genocide, is it? And I'm not a fan of The Witcher. I don't like the books, I don't like the show, and I don't like the games. I wasn't exactly thrilled to find out there's a new installment on the way, but honestly, some of the reactionary propaganda that's trying to dampen excitement for the game is getting me a tiny bit amped for it. Like the claim that a senior writer at CDPR said they want to beat up gamers. A claim that, unfortunately, I've been unable to confirm or find a source for, but I've seen it reported a few times. Relatable as hell if it's real, though.
God, I'm gonna beat up so many nerds after this video.
Anyway, that's all for this video, but remember, the culture war is not just angry quote tweets and flame wars in Facebook comments. The same people who are mad about game companies waking up to the fact that sex and gender are not essential realities that conform to simple binaries are also cheering while their cult spreads its bigoted dogma about gender across the internet and passes laws in various parts of the United States to redefine sex in a way that conforms to their anti-scientific beliefs. It would be irresponsible to not anticipate an escalation in tensions in the near future, and things have always been tense. I got attacked by a group of people with baseball bats once because I was wearing a miniskirt and makeup. Another time, a Nazi tried to stab me in the face because I, in his words, looked like a faggot. One time, some assholes on the street ripped a queer anarchist patch off my jacket and started swinging on me until I pulled an axe out of my backpack and chased them off. You get the idea. I've got lots of stories, and I'm sure some of the people watching this do too. When I talk about the culture war, I'm referring, in part, to a physical conflict that's fought with guns and knives and Molotovs, and we're enlisted whether we like it or not. It's very likely that things are going to get pretty intense over the next few years, so prepare yourselves. And if you can't be safe, be dangerous.